All right, Doug. We were going to talk about preliminary title. What is a preliminary title report, and why do I need to know that if I'm gonna buy or sell a house?
Well, basically, a preliminary title report is relating to a seller. So when you're ready to sell your home, you get everything else ready for marketing your home with your real estate agent, and all of a sudden, 60 days down the line or whenever, you find a buyer and you agree on the price and everything's going fine, and then about 2 weeks before closing, you get a call from your title company saying, "Did you know you don't own your property?"
Okay.
And you say, "Well, I'm pretty sure I own my property because I've been making mortgage payments, and when I bought the house, I saw the seller who said he owned the house too, so I'm pretty sure."
And you went through all these documents and everything, right? And you gave all this money.
Yep. So, so what happens is that it's usually a problem that can be solved, but it's just everybody's anxious to close and move and get on.
Why would they say you don't don't really own your property? What does that mean?
Maybe I'm making a little bit of a joke out of it, but what happens is that sometimes mistakes can happen when you purchase property, and instead of recording a deed for your house for the property you thought you bought, somebody made a typographical error either at the courthouse or at the closing company when you bought the house, and there was an error made, or there's some other problems with the title.
So what if they made an error? Give me an example.
Sure.
What?
An example would be that
because you guys had this happen.
Yeah, this has happened to us occasionally over the years, and one was where he bought lot 11, block 1 in such and such subdivision, and the person who typed up the warranty deed, the transfer from the previous owner to the current owner, instead of typing in lot 11, block 1, typed in lot 1, block 1. Nobody caught it. Everybody went along fine, money exchanged hands, moved in, and 5 years later went to sell the house, and the title company calls up and says, "There's no record of you owning this property. It's still owned by the guy you bought it from." And we're investigating to find out what happened.
So in that case, actually, what really happened on paper is they bought a lot that they
didn't intend. Nobody intended them to buy lot 1. They wanted to buy lot 11, and it was a typographical error. Well, it's just a little mistake, but it is a big mistake when it comes time to retransfer the property again to the new owner, because now you have to prove to the world that you really bought lot 1 and not lot 11.
You mean lot 11? They had.
Excuse me. Yeah, now I'm getting it. But really, he bought lot 11 instead of lot 1. So now, well, that's simple. The owner said, "I'll just go." The seller now, who wants to transfer ownership or selling it to the new buyer, says, "I'll just go back to this old seller, and we'll just type up a new deed and have him sign a new corrective deed." And well, that sounds like a good idea, except for that the gentleman that he bought it from died.
Okay.
And there was 11 heirs. And these are children and grandchildren who lived from New York to California, and the attorney that was involved with trying to get this corrective deed signed would have to have been signed by all 11 heirs, would cost between $5,000 to $10,000 depending on what's going on. And you can imagine if you yourself are an heir to somebody, and somebody comes up and says, "Sign this deed, please. There was a mistake made when your granddad or your dad died." You'd want to know why, and so the timing was wrong. So that's what I'm saying is, like, if all of a sudden 2 weeks before closing this happens, it can be fixed. It was a typographical error, but it takes time and money to fix it.
So instead you're suggesting a preliminary title report.
The preliminary title report is just that, before we find a buyer, before we really are ready to officially transfer the property, we check the title out for any mistakes. Now, so that during the marketing of the property, those mistakes, if there are any, can be fixed
because probably if that happened 2 weeks before closing, you might have some buyers who back out. Yeah. Here they want to buy your property, and then you come to them as the seller and you say, actually, there was this mistake from 5 years ago, and I have to get 11 people to sign off on this document, and it's gonna cost me $5,000 or $10,000, and so I need you to wait around, Mr. Buyer,
Yep.
for 2 or 3 months while I get this figured out.
Right.
And the buyer might say, well, you know,
Can't
that
wait.
doesn't fit my situation at all, or the price, you know, is gonna be different, or, so
Yeah,
that's what
so
can
those,
happen.
so that's why it's good to know,
Mhm.
just to double check. 9 times out of 10, I'm sure there's not gonna be a problem, but it's when there is that problem that you're glad you took the time to look into it. Another example could be that the person you bought the house from, or the person they bought the house from, or person they bought the house from, maybe got a divorce,
Uh-huh.
and one of the parties to the divorce didn't deed out properly. So let's say the scenario is we own a property together, we get a divorce, the wife leaves, the husband retains ownership of the property,
Yeah.
but for some reason the wife never gives a deed back to the husband to get rid of her interest. And then so 20 years down the line, that's what we call a cloud on the title. We say Mrs. Adams back in 1990
Uh-huh.
or 1985 never deeded out. So we gotta go find her so she can officially deed out. Otherwise, we've gotta go through other legal channels to try to make this better.
And part of the big catch, if you're the buyer of a property like that, part of that catch is, you know, you might understand the cloud on the title, and you might even, I mean, most people wouldn't be okay with that, but you might be okay with that
Yeah.
because you understand what's going on. If you're paying cash,
Mhm.
that's one thing. But if you need a mortgage company, then the mortgage company
Mortgage.
definitely is not gonna accept any clouds on the
Yes,
title, right?
And preliminary title work also includes any pending assessments or any assessments that might be in a property.
Okay,
You might have
like-
thought that you paid the city for the new city water and sewer that was put in 10 years ago, and somebody made a mistake there and didn't record those payments or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's
Yeah,
a-
they wrote down a different parcel number.
Could be a lot of
And
things.
you gotta, that's why like you wanna save all those cleared checks.
For-
And stuff like
Right.
that to the city, cause
Well-
like I wrote you a check for $10,000 to be like, oh, we don't have record of it.
Let's
Oh, the
go-
check was cashed, where did it go? Yeah.
Well, let's go back to the other first issue that I had where I got a deed for lot 1 instead of lot 11. Well, guess what? That deed was recorded
At the courthouse, at the
on
county
the wrong
court.
lot. So just think about that guy didn't have any knowledge of this. All of a sudden, somebody comes down to the courthouse and records a deed on my property. I'm not even selling my property. So now when he goes to sell, he doesn't even know there's a problem because it got recorded incorrectly on his land.
Uh-huh.
Well,
Now,
he
is
goes
the
to
bug.
sell it. What is this?
Somebody else claiming ownership on
Claim
on your
ownership
land.
of my property. I never
Yeah.
sold it to that guy. So, anyways, so as you can see,
And
there's
that's why you have real estate attorneys.
that's why you have real estate attorneys, and that's why you have title insurance to fix these problems. But the main thing is, most of this stuff can be fixed usually fairly easily at a minimal cost or no cost because you have title insurance. But the reason for the preliminary title is just to make sure, so that when we do find a buyer, let's say we get a cash buyer and they want to close in 5, 7, 10 days. Well,
Oh.
if we've got problems with the title, we lose that buyer. So we don't want that to happen. So highly
Okay.
suggest, list the property, tell your real estate agent to order a preliminary title report for you, and you're off and running.
Okay, thanks Doug.
Yep, you bet.